I washed my hair. I'm a bit sunburnt. But hey, it's time to film a video. Today we're doing my top 19 books of 2019, which is, if you can tell, we've got a few gaps around. It's a new setup, so it's probably not spoilers at this point. You probably don't know what's where. But we've got a big list. There are a lot of things actually that might have made this list. I had a hard time narrowing things down, but we got to this, I guess. So today we'll be talking about 19 books that I read during the month of 2019. So they didn't all come out in 2019. I read them all in 2019. They're not really in any particular order because I'm not good at ranking things, but I guess kind of loosely the stuff at the end are some things I liked a lot, and then like the ones at the end are, well, less a lot. I don't know. But let's talk about some 19 books. First up on this list, we have a book that I only recently read. That is The Toll by Neil Shusterman. I literally finished this like days ago. This is the third and final book in the Scythe, like Archivist Scythe series. And it might just be that I just read this and I'm super hyped for it currently, but this was so good. It was a great conclusion to the series. I think it was like not convenient at all and dealt with a lot of problems, and this series is so good. Like, it's probably one of my favorite dystopian utopian, it is my favorite dystopian utopian series, and probably one of my favorite trilogies. It's just so good. So the series essentially follows, if you didn't know, a world where death has been completely eradicated, and the world is overseen by an artificial intelligence known as the Thunderhead, and we follow two people who become apprenticed to Scythes, and Scythes are essentially the people mandated to maintain population control. So they like glean or cull parts of the population, and it's meant to be super honorable, but like, as always, power be corrupt. And it's so good. This series is amazing. This last one is a beast. It's like over 600 pages. It's like 650, I think. 630. But it was honestly one of the best books I've read. I will also be talking about this in my December wrap-up if you want to hear more detailed thoughts about this one. Next we have The Female of the Species by Mindy McGinnis. This is a YA-ish contemporary. We follow Alex is the main character. She is a little bit nuts, but in kind of the best way. Her older sister was raped and murdered, and she's kind of understood the capacity within herself for violent revenge. This 100% is on this list because of the ending, but I don't want to tell you about it because that would be a spoiler. But if you've read this, isn't it mind-blowing? Like, that ending, folks. I would 100% recommend this book. It is very dark. It does feature animal death kind of regularly as part of an exploration of the themes. So if that's something that's really triggering to you, be warned, but also triggers for rape and murder and stuff. This was so good. I loved this. I read a large portion of it out loud to my boss one day, and she was hooked from the part I read out loud. It was honestly so good. Yes, very dark though, very dark. This came out a few years ago, and I think a lot of people had it on their favorites on the year it came out. Then we have Descendant of the Crane by Joan Hay. This is one that I ummed and ahed about whether it was going to end up on this list, and that is not because I didn't love my time reading it. I buddy read this with April, and I think I liked it a little bit more than her, just a little bit. The only problem with it is this is clearly meant to be a series, but the publishers only signed on for one book. So it's a standalone that obviously needs to be more books, but this publishing house has kind of been getting a bit of a reputation for being a bit nasty. So yes, this is a Chinese inspired fantasy. We follow Hesina, who is like the next in line for her throne, and her dad is killed, and she's going on a big mission to figure out like and prosecute who killed him. And it's got fantasy elements, and it's honestly so good, but I desperately need the sequel, and if that never happens, it's going to be very disappointing. But also this cover is stunning. Like, this is the most beautiful book. I just need there to be a second book because this deserves it. It's so good. Then we have The 10,000 Doors of January by Alex E. Harrow. This is a adult fantasy, portal fantasy, and we follow January, obviously, who goes through or discovers these doors to different worlds. And honestly, this was so good. I did slam through this pretty fast in a couple of days. It reminds me a lot of the kind of writing of Erin Morgenstern, and it just is so whimsical, but also really thought-provoking and interesting, and oh, I don't know, it was so good. I definitely recommend this. The cover is also stunning, and this was just a great read. I think it got like a 4.75 from me, but like a lot of things on this list weren't a 5-star, because sometimes my ratings are like all over the place. There are things I rate 5-star that then don't stick with me, and things that I rate less than a 5-star that really do, and I'm pretty sure this was one of those. Then one that is probably not a surprise and is probably going to be on a lot of people's lists. This is Daisy Jones on the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is the like follow-up, I guess, to Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. This is told in a documentary format. Like, we're following people's descriptions of the event, all the different characters, which some people say means the audiobook is the superior way to listen to this, and I would probably agree, a superior way to read this, and I would probably agree, but I read the physical copy and still loved it. I do need to reread on audio, but I freaking loved this book. It's very Fleetwood Mac-esque. The Stevie Nicks vibes are strong, and like, I just loved this so much. So we obviously follow Daisy as she joins the Six, and then they'll like rise and fall from fame, and it's so good. 70s, or end of the 70s, oh yeah, through the 70s. Rock and roll, honestly, such a good contemporary story. I freaking loved this. A book I listened to an audiobook. This is An Unkindness of Magicians by Kat Howard. This is a relatively short fantasy story, but apparently there's a sequel coming out and I'm so excited for it. I do need to pick up a physical copy of this because I absolutely loved this book. It's an adult fantasy following competitions, but it's set in modern times in New York, I believe, from memory, and the modern kind of magic and the way the houses work, and I love a blend of like high fantasy magic in a modern setting. It's honestly one of my favorite things, and that's one of the reasons I absolutely loved this book. I listened to an audiobook, but I would definitely love to reread it physically, and I can't wait for book 2, which comes out sometime in 2020. Then we have Blanca Aroha, which I read at the start of the year. This is a magical realism story following, which is a retelling of the Red Rose and Snow White Ruby Red. I can't remember the actual like thing, but we're following 2 girls, and they, every generation, they always have 2 girls in the family, and one is always taken by the swans. And we're kind of following these 2 girls as the sisters, as they try and save each other from the swans. It's honestly so beautiful. So Anna Marie McLemore is a trans author, and this features a lot of trans characters, including one of the love interests is 100% trans. I can't remember about the other one. But yeah, so 2 boys get kind of drawn in to their game with the swans game that is being played, and honestly, I loved this so much. I kind of want to reread it already, but I need to read more Anna Marie McLemore, and I'm very excited to pick up the ones coming out this year especially. For a science fiction twist on this list, we have The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. This is the first in the Wayfarers trilogy, and I read all 3 this year and absolutely loved all of them. This is not the only Becky Chambers on this list, spoiler alert, but I absolutely adored this with my whole heart and soul. This series follows a group, like a ship that is a tunneling ship, so they travel long distances and then tunnel back to make a tunnel, and we follow Rosemary, who has joined a crew, and we kind of like learn about the crew and about space exploration in this future time. And it's a lot about tolerance and like different alien species, and it's so exploratory of like culture and what it means to be human, and honestly, or like sentient, I guess, and it's honestly like the best. Oh, it's so good. Freaking love this series, definitely recommend them. I think this one is the best from the series, but all 3 I really enjoyed, though apparently not everyone likes the 3rd book. April hated it. I really enjoyed it, so I don't know. Next we have a big hunk in fantasy, and that is Founder's Side by Robert Jackson Bennett. This is the first in the Founders trilogy. I believe the second one's coming out soon, early in 2020. At one point it was January, now it looks like it's April. I don't know. But this is a urban fantasy, I would say, but like an urban high fantasy. In this world, it's all in this city, but it features the magic system is like written, and you write on things to change their perception of themselves, like objects' perception of themselves. It's very interesting, and I think the strongest part of this book is the magic system, and the way even the characters don't really know all the rules and how it works, and you're learning alongside them and like breaking the rules, but in like the best way, not in like a lame way. And it's honestly so good. I highly recommend this series. I can't wait to read more Robert Jackson Bennett, and especially book 2 to this series. I'm so excited. Why did your door just open? Another audiobook I listened to this year is If We Were Villains by Emma Rio. This is a dark academia story, adult literary fiction, I guess, murder mystery-esque, following this group of pretentious college students who are part of a Shakespearean troupe thing in college, and it's a lot about like death and murder and I don't know, it's just so good. That door does not want to stay shut. I absolutely adored this. It was so good. The audiobook was also really great, but I do kind of really want to buy a copy for myself. I really do. Next up, another contemporary, and that is Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. This is the book of the year, kind of. Everyone loved it. This is a alternative history, if kind of like a Hillary character won the 2016 election, and her son and the Prince of England have like a romance. Honestly, this was so fun. Everyone's been talking about it, so I won't rave on and on about it, but like it was really good. Next up, we have The Lost Coast by Amy Rose Capetto, which is another I kind of say like low fantasy. We follow these witches. It's a witchy book. This group of girls, they're called the Greys, and it's like set in the redwood forest of California, and it's all about like magic and like the complicatedness of queer relationships and magic. And oh, I can't even remember the details of this anymore. I really want to reread it. It was so good. I absolutely loved it. Amy Rose Capetto is, I don't love everything she writes, but this one like ticked all my boxes, and I definitely will continue picking up books from her in the future in the hope that another one ticks all my boxes. But like, this is honestly one of my favorite books of the year. Obviously, it's on this list. Next up, the final audiobook from this list, which I probably should also buy for myself because it was so good. This is Magic for Liars by Sarah Gailey. This is a again, kind of like a modern fantasy murder mystery story. We follow a girl who's not magic, but her sister is magic, and she's a detective, and she gets like ordered to go to the magic school to solve a murder that happened there, like a magical murder, because she's a detective, but she knows that magic exists. Honestly, this was so good. I devoured this audiobook in like 2 days. I was obsessed with it. I want to read everything Sarah Gailey writes. I believe they're also a trans author or non-binary author, and this was so good. So they have 2 new books coming out next year, a YA and another adult sci-fi fantasy. But honestly, I'm so excited. I can't wait to read more from Sarah Gailey. And I'm probably gonna like, I don't know why I didn't think of it sooner, but these 3 books I'm gonna go order like in 10 minutes. We're starting to get into the like absolute cream of the crop territory. This next book is Middlegame by Shauna McGuire. This was one of those books that I instantly knew would be 5 stars from like the moment I started reading it. This is a modern fantasy sci-fi, I don't know. Shauna McGuire does the weirdest shit, but it's honestly like my shit. I love it so much. This is a chunker. It's like just over 500 pages. It's not that chunky. But this is like about gods and creation, and oh, it's just so good. It's impossible to describe. We follow Roger and Dodger, who are twins. They're like one of lots of twins, and they are like embodiments of forces of nature. I don't know, it's so confusing to describe, but when you're reading it, it makes total sense, and honestly, it's just so good. It's so good. Go read it. A big chunky fantasy that is definitely a big chunky fantasy. We have The Prior of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. If you didn't know, this one's like 800 pages. But I loved it. This is a standalone fantasy. I have a feeling Samantha Shannon might be writing other books in this world, but this is a standalone. It has dragons. It actually has like 2 types of dragons, like Eastern dragons and Western dragons, and female romance at its core, and this was so good. I almost didn't have this on this list, but then April reminded me it existed, and I was like, why isn't this on the list? Gotta put it on the list. It was so good. I read it at the start of the year and like devoured it. Yeah, would totally recommend. It was so good. Next up, we have a novella, and that is This Is How You Lose the Time War by Max Gladstone. This I received from the LGBTQ+ Read subscription service. Dahlia picked this out for me, or recommended this to me, and I love it. Oh, it was so good. This is a I guess if you like well-explained magic systems, you wouldn't like this, or well-explained worlds, because it's kind of like a sci-fi magic. We're following 2 characters, Red and Blue, who are on opposite sides in this time war, and they essentially like jump backwards and forwards through time, manipulating the threads of time, and they're leaving each other coded messages, and it's honestly so good. It's a female romance, but like obviously an enemies to lovers romance. It's like honestly so good. I recommend everyone reads this. It's only like what, under 200 pages. It'd take you a day. Or from a lot of people would take a day, so go read it. It's so good. Then we have Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, which is another thing I read kind of recently. This is a dark fantasy, which I think threw a lot of people because it's not really what she's written before. It's adult, dark, but honestly, I love this way more than I loved any of Leigh Bardugo's other work. I thought the rest was just like good YA fantasy, but not like mind-blowing. Like, I think Six of Crows may have made my best of last year, but like scraping in, I wasn't like absolutely in love with it. This on the other hand ticked all my boxes. I absolutely adored it. I can't wait for book 2. I have a lot of feelings. I loved this, but I think it's way more up my alley. Like, you could have marketed this to me, not knowing it was Leigh Bardugo, and it would have been the kind of thing I picked up, which I think is the opposite of most of its readership, which is probably why not everyone really loves it. This is like dark, I don't know. We follow Alex, who is at Yale on kind of like a scholarship because she can see ghosts and they need someone who can see ghosts. So they kind of like just pick her up from her world and pop her in Yale to work for them, as the like 9th secret society. Loved this so much. Can't wait to read book 2. I have emotions. And here we have our other Becky Chambers on the list. This is To Be Taught If Fortunate. This is honestly, it was a tie between these last two as to which would be like my favorite book of the year, because I was absolutely floored by this. This is another novella. It's like, let's see, what is it? How many pages? Like less than 140 pages. But it's honestly the most impactful 140 pages I've ever read. I read it all in one sitting, and I cried. If you haven't read this yet, go read this. This is sci-fi. We follow a group of 4, I think it's just the 4 of them. 4 explorers who can, like, humans have developed the ability to adjust their body to acclimate to different environments rather than adjusting different worlds to suit humans. And so these 4 adventurers are going off in a ship. They're all romantically involved or platonic, queer platonic relationships. So they're a polyamorous quad in, like, I think like all the different links of the quad have different kind of relationships. One character is ace. They all have kind of like different connections to each other, but they all love each other, and they're on an adventure into space to like go explore different planets with different life forms, and it's harrowing and really emotional and absolutely beautiful. I adored this book. As I said, I cried. The polyamory is like so well done, and I'm just like, this is so good. And finally, the final book, The Style of Sea by Erin Morgenstern, which we're not surprised is on this list. If I was on BookTube in high school when I read The Night Circus, that would have been my favorite book of that year. This was stunning. Erin Morgenstern just writes the right kind of books for me. This was like perfect. It's a whimsical, very lyrical story about Zachary, who discovers a book that has a story from his life in it, and it kind of sends him on a whirlwind adventure. The magic never quite makes sense. That's kind of like the joy of an Erin Morgenstern. So you have to be able to like I don't mind when a magic system doesn't make sense. In fact, sometimes I like it better. But so like if you like a strict magic system with rules, don't bother with her, you won't like it. But for me, it was perfect. The motifs, the themes, it just like ticked all the boxes. It has a like gentle male-male relationship here, like it's not a big focus of the story, but it is in there. Lots of characters that really like pulled at my heartstrings, and honestly I loved this. So this is like a tie with To Be Taught If Fortunate as like my favorite book of the year. Can't quite decide. They were both so good. And yeah, I love this hardback. Like I went out and bought the hardback because I felt like I needed it in my life. I just lent out my paperback copy to my friend. She's going to be reading it, and I'm just, it's so good. It's so good. So those are all the books that I think are my absolute favorites for the year 2019. There were a lot of things that were like gonna be honorable mentions, but like by the time you get to 19 books and 10 honorable mentions, it's like a quarter of what you read during the year, or at least for me. So I needed to like rein it in a bit. I thought 19 for 2019 was a good place to sit. Yeah. Yep. I don't know what else to say. Let me know if you want to chat about any of these, because I loved all of them. Can't wait to go buy those 3 things that I read on audiobook that I can't believe I hadn't bought already, so that I can hand them at my friends. And anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon with another video. Let me know what your favorite book of the year was down in the comments. See you next time. Bye.